Welcome and thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Modernization, Moving from Data Integration to Interoperability. My name is Raleigh Gould and I'll be your moderator for today's event. Our featured speaker is John Santaferraro, Research Director at Enterprise Management Associates. John has 23 years of experience in data and analytics from startups to executive positions at Fortune 50 companies. His deep understanding of the industry comes from years of leadership and implementation, product and marketing organizations, along with multiple big data Imagineering efforts. And before I hand things over to John, I wanted today's audience to know that he will be concluding his presentation today by taking your questions. Feel free to log them anytime by using the Q&A functionality. Also, today's event is being recorded, and you will receive a follow-up email from EMA later today that will include resources from today's event. So I hope you will check that out. And now I'd like to go ahead and turn things over to our featured speaker, John Santaferraro. John?
Welcome, everyone. And I want to give a special thank you to our sponsor today, InfoWorks. InfoWorks has a great pipeline management and automation system. They do enterprise data operations and orchestration. And so their technology is especially relevant to what we're doing today. So thank you, InfoWorks. I also wanted to give you some hashtags for social engagement, as well as my Twitter, Santaferraro, and the Twitter handle for EMA Research. Feel free to use EMA Webinar as a key hashtag, as well as any of the others that are here. On the agenda today, we're going to be talking about this idea of moving from data integration to interoperability, the modernization of data integration. What is that? What is driving the modernization of data integration? We'll look at the MDI State of the Union. Where are your counterparts at in other companies? We'll look at the challenges of modern data integration, and then some best practices around automation and pipeline management. So we want to begin with a simple definition. What is modern data integration? But before we get there, it's important to think a little bit about the history of data integration. Back in the 1980s, data integration was done hand-coding COBOL scripts, particularly on the mainframe. In the 1990s, we introduced simple integration. Companies like Informatica, for example, that came on the scene in the mid-1990s, really designed at that point to be able to take data from a handful of sources and move them into typically a data warehouse, a single target, or maybe a couple of targets. There was also separate integration. There were different kinds of integration that were going on at that point. There were different tools for data integration, different tools for application integration, different tools for messaging. In the 2000s, we began to see the entry of point-to-point integrations as the Internet began to take off and applications were launched on the Internet. Their application integration tools moved towards API integration. The 2000s also gave us big data integration, using big data platforms and open source technology to be able to bring data together. And then we also saw the introduction of iPaaS, Integration Platform as a Service, really the beginnings of cloud integration services. And then in the 2010s, we began to see a move towards integration platforms. People were tired of having many different integration tools for applications, for data, for APIs, for their messaging. And so we began to see the emergence of these integrated data integration and integration platforms. We also saw the introduction of streaming platforms, which now can operate both for data integration, application integration, API integration, and in many cases doing the analytics as well that are necessary for that data in motion. And so modern data integration is is really the modernization of legacy data integration. MDI consolidates integration into multi-purpose integration platforms. It connects entire ecosystems, and it's now driving interoperability. Integrating data for analysis is no longer enough. That data needs to be available in real time. And so this combination of data integration and streaming analytics and API integration is driving the concept of interoperability. And in the MDI space, through the use of artificial intelligence and machine learning, along with a rich set of metadata, these new technologies are ushering in a new era of self-service at hyperspeed and the simplified management of complex multi-directional data pipelines. And that's what the research that I am presenting today will really dig into, all of these aspects of modern data integration. In terms of the EMA point of view on modern data integration, our point of view is that vendors that excel in the use of machine learning, artificial intelligence, and then the autonomous development, deployment, and orchestration of these complex data pipelines in their platforms, these companies are going to be the ones that are going to create significant differentiation and barriers to entry. These are the vendors, the companies that are going to be the leaders in the next 5 and 10 years. In addition to that, from an end user perspective, companies that invest in modern data integration platforms can expect to accelerate their journey towards becoming insight-driven organizations. They can expect to expand the reach of their analytics programs to more business areas and to more people, and ultimately to be able to gain a competitive advantage. So what is it that is driving the modernization of data integration? A lot of this is coming from digital transformation. Digital transformation is producing massive new data and pushing data consumption requirements into real time. In addition, mobile, SaaS, and IoT expansion are really pushing the boundaries of legacy technology. There's an increase in the speed of insight-driven business. The business requires data feeds from transactions, applications, APIs, service providers, data providers, and devices of every kind. And even more complex ecosystems like supply chain, social networks, and healthcare take integration and push the requirements even further. And so in addition to digital business, there's a number of new networks of relationships that have been spawned where companies are no longer operating by themselves. They're operating with prospects, engaging customers, suppliers, partners, marketplaces, storefronts. And there's new applications that are spanning these networks across entire ecosystems. And so that, in addition, is creating these requirements for interoperability. And so what we're seeing now is the beginning and move towards this kind of interoperability. So in the research that we did, one of the questions we asked, what are the business drivers for the modernization of your organization's overall data integration program? Now granted, about 80% of the respondents in this particular research came from the IT side and about 20% from the business side. So you're going to see that there is a leaning towards what matters to IT as opposed to not just a pure business perspective here. So the number one answer, and number two, cost savings and time savings. So the IT department is essentially spending too much money on integration. It's taking too much time, and even the IT organization recognizes that this is impacting the business. It's keeping them from gaining a competitive advantage. It's keeping them from generating more revenue or getting products to market on time or transforming the customer experience, being able to innovate at a fast pace. And so the business drivers really have to do a lot with cost and time, but also with the impediment that brings to the business. We also asked, what are the technical drivers for the modernization of your organization's overall data integration program? And here what we see is evidence that while much of technology has changed in the last 25 to 30 years, much of the effort that it takes to get analytics to market has not changed. When I began my career back in 1995, when I founded a small data warehouse company, in 1995, 70 to 80% of every project was integration. Guess what? Today, it still is the most difficult and the most heavy lifting part of any analytics project. And so the number one need for driver for a modernization of a data integration is the excessive amount of time that it takes to test and deploy data integration or data pipelines. Along with that, there's a strategic move to the cloud that most companies are making right now, and we'll see this theme repeated in the research. And that further complicates things because now you have the combination of data spread out in SaaS, you have data in IoT, you have data in mobile apps, and then you have data also being stored on premises in the cloud, and you have a massive migration of data and applications to the cloud. And so that drives the need for new types of interoperability as opposed to older data integration. And there's also an increasing need with digital transformation to be able to respond to real-time events. And we're going to see as we look further into this research, actually in just a couple of slides, what is actually driving that need and that push towards real time. We also looked at the data integration, preparation, pipeline management programs. So to dig down into the technology itself, what are the problems with today's technology that people are experiencing? The number one, too much time spent on break and fix. The challenge is that with data constantly changing, with applications constantly changing, with new applications being added consistently, there's far too much time being spent by organizations working on trying to fix whatever breaks in the data integration program and in the data pipelines. Along with that, there's constraints of current data integration technology. There's a lot of companies that are still using older technology, and they're trying to manage data and applications in the digital world, and the old technology is not keeping up. And then the obvious difficulty connecting data from different platforms and strategic move to the cloud right to the top here as well. But we also wanted to look at what is it that is pushing this need for more real-time integration? Where is engagement hitting strongly? All of the areas that are on here are increasingly important as digital transformation takes place. But the number one, customer engagement. Customer has been the number one area for data and analytics, again, since 1975. Nothing is new here. And now if you look at digital transformation over the last 10 years, the beginning place for digital transformation was with apps and devices that actually engage customers in different ways. It began on the web. It moved to smartphones and apps on phones. It includes interaction with different kinds of devices in the world of IoT. And that's driving. And what happens is when a customer has an app, they expect a response in near real time. And so that drives the need for the integration of data coming out of those customer engagement apps with all of the customer 360 intelligence on the back end in order to make an intelligible response to that customer in real time. Along with that, employee engagement is right up there near the top, being able to manage human capital and respond to employee interactions in near real time. The rest of it you can see there. I mean, these are all of the different areas of digital transformation that are driving and pushing things more and more towards real time. Since there is this massive move to the cloud, we also wanted to know what is driving your organization's need for cloud integration. Interestingly enough, improved security was at the very top of the list. We have in cloud environments where cloud integration is being done, we have gone from an era where everything in the cloud was questioned based on security and privacy issues to a point now where the key cloud vendors have provided security that is in many cases better than the security that is being deployed internally and on-premises at many different companies. There's also a perceived cost savings. Now we're going to look later in this research at actual cost that is being incurred based on move to the cloud, data being integrated in the cloud, integrating cloud data with on-premises data. But there is a perceived a lower cost for a move to the cloud and integration in the cloud. Flexibility is number 3. Why do they need the cloud? Because they're deploying more internet applications, and if applications are running in the internet or mobile applications are running, it makes sense to store that data in the cloud, and that data needs to be integrated fairly quickly. So these are some of the things that are actually driving the move to the cloud. We also wanted to find out what's happening in modern data integration. Where are companies at in this journey, and where are they at, and what's going to change in the next 12 months? It's important, I think, as you're deploying integration programs, as you're looking to modernize your data integration programs, as you're looking to move towards interoperability. What's happening in the marketplace? So the first thing we looked at is what kinds of data are being integrated. And so you can see on the left, current, there's still a predominance of structured data, high at 40%, semi-structured, pure text and images and video are a little bit lower. And you can see in the next 12 months, the amount of structured data is going down slightly. Semi-structured is going down. Pure text remains the same. The main area that seems to be increasing is in the use of images and video. And I think that's probably due to the fact that the more there is engagement with customers, especially, there is engagement with video content. There's engagement with images. There's engagement that is very different than what engagement looked like based on the experience of the customer and the likelihood of that customer to expect something similar to a Facebook experience or an Instagram experience as they engage with different vendors and different companies. So that's the main increase over the next 12 months. We also looked at what was happening in terms of the percentage of data that is in the cloud versus on-premise. And what was interesting to me is the amount of data in the cloud for most customers has already surpassed the amount of data that they're storing on-premises. And that is going to increase fairly significantly in the next 12 months. There's a move from 53% in the cloud to 59%. That's more than a 10% increase in data moving from on-premises and into the cloud. So this is going to make the management of complex data pipelines even more important in the next 12 months. Because remember, the more data gets spread out between cloud and on-premises, the more challenge it is to be able to manage the complexity of data moving in different directions. Because don't assume that once you move data into the cloud, it's there for good. Once it gets into the cloud, you may need to move some result set of that data, some analysis of that data back on premises to be useful in the operation of the business or with finance information that is kept on site. So again, movement of data into the cloud means more complexity in terms of the management of data pipelines. We also looked at what mode of data integration were being used. So on the left, you can see the predominant is cloud integration, 34%. So cloud integration has now passed on-premises integration. You could really combine cloud integration and iPaaS. I separated them because there's a number of vendors that are on-premises that make their tools available in the cloud. They operate in the cloud as they would on-premise. So it's probably a combination of those two, and the on-premises would be combined with some kind of desktop integration. And desktop integration is there because a number of BI tools, as an example, are adding a light version of data prep and data integration into their tools. And there's other kind of entry-level kinds of data integration tools that only run on the desktop. So again, cloud is going to continue to grow in the next 12 months, moving from 34% expected to grow to 41% in the next year. That's a fairly aggressive move to the cloud. That is almost 20%. That's about an 18% increase in data moving to the cloud. We also wanted to look specifically at which tools or processes were being used. Really important to note that most of data integration is still happening on the data integration and data prep tools. API and iPaaS are at about 18%. The databases and big data platforms are still workforces, and manual coding still at 13%. And to better understand this, if you let me just overlay this, you can see that that manual coding is probably on the down, and so is messaging platforms. There's still people that are using their legacy messaging platforms to move data and do basic change data capture and some other basic kinds of things. And then you can see on the lower hand, you see some of the up-and-coming technologies, pipeline management or automation platforms. Data warehouse automation platforms are growing, streaming platforms. And we're beginning to see now ecosystem integration platforms. These are integration platforms that integrate all of the different kinds of integration into one single integration platform. So it's interesting to see. We also asked a similar question looking at data sources in the overall integration. And here you can see the combined data sources looking at the current in blue and in green the next 12 months. And so there isn't a whole lot of change that is happening, it seems, over the next 12 months. The one place where there does see where we will see some growth is in the Internet of Things or interaction with data and machines. We also asked what's the difference if your organization's integration either through server technology or serverless or agent technology. Server technology still tends to be predominant. As there's a move to the cloud, it makes sense that there's more serverless and agent-based technology. That serverless or agent-based technology, I think, is also encroaching on premises. And there is an expectation to move more towards serverless technology, again, in the next 12 months. We also asked, on average, how long does it take to develop a data pipeline? We're going to look at both the development and the deployment of data pipelines. And you can see here that there is a fairly lengthy period that it takes to put data pipelines into to develop them. And we split it out, by the way, and also asked, on average, how long does it take to make a data pipeline operational into production? And if you put these two side by side, you can see the development is in blue, the deployment in green. It's interesting. One of the interesting things that came out of the survey is that it takes longer to actually deploy a data pipeline than it does to develop it. And if you combine these two together, you can see why this is taking up 70 to 80% of every analytics project. It also indicates the need for this shift in the marketplace that we're seeing. So most of the data integration tools, API integration tools, focused on the actual development of data pipelines. Modern data integration tools are focused on the operation and orchestration of these data pipelines. And so this is a really important trend because in the past, a lot of the orchestration and operation was done with a separate set of tools. It was done with messaging. It was done with job schedulers. And as companies begin to deploy more data pipelines, as data pipelines tend to now move in different directions, from app to app, machine to machine, from cloud to on-premises, on-premise to cloud, this area of orchestration and operation of data pipelines becomes increasingly important. This is just, companies can't afford to spend this much time on the development and deployment of data pipelines, and they can't afford to have different sets of tools doing different parts of this effort. We also looked at, on average, what percentage of your time do you spend managing break and fix issues for data pipelines. It's interesting that 61% of the respondents are spending between 30 and 50% of their time just on fixing what breaks in their data pipeline environment. This is a huge problem. And this is why we're beginning to see the introduction of new technologies, data pipeline automation technologies that are using machine learning and artificial intelligence to be able to identify when something is broken and to be able to actually fix it without human intervention. Again, companies can't afford to be spending this much time on break and fix issues. And so that's another interesting. We also wanted to know, how long does it take to repair breaks in the data pipelines? What is your mean time to repair? And this is basic service terminology, right, for service delivery. The service delivery industry has been around for a long time, and you can see that that at least 50% are beyond a 4-hour period of time in order to fix breaks in the data pipeline. So not only is break and fix time consuming, the delays that are being created by breaks are also detrimental to the business that is using the data. We also wanted to know, how do you currently manage conflicts among multiple data pipelines? And as you can see here, the number one answer, it's being done manually. Again, we're seeing the number of data pipelines in management increasing from tens and 20s up to hundreds of data pipelines. And what used to be manageable manually is no longer managed manually, and that's what's taking so long. The second answer was data integration platforms, and quite frankly, data integration platforms weren't created to be able to manage conflicts among different data pipelines. There's a number of people still using job schedulers and doing this with hand coding. This indicates, from the EMA perspective, this indicates a huge problem, because the number of data pipelines is only going to grow, and it's simply not feasible to continue manually using data integration platforms, job schedulers, hand coding. This is not going to work. There was some good news. People are recognizing that this is not going to work going forward. So this is actually resorted based on plans in the future. And so strangely enough, job scheduler and data integration platforms are still up there, but there is some recognition that there's a need to move to these data pipeline automation platform. So that jumped from 8% using pipeline automation platforms today to 20% who plan to do that in the future. So that is actually good news. But I think that there is some education that needs to be done. Most of the marketplace is not even aware that pipeline automation platforms are in the market today. There's some large data integration vendors that are introducing this concept into their tools, but it's fairly new. There's some startups, some well-funded startups, I should say, that are moving into this space. InfoWorks happens to be one of them. I think this is a place that anyone who runs a data integration program and is moving to the cloud and looking to move towards interoperability, this is a key technology to be able to look at moving forward. We also wanted to know, as a sign of maturity, what percentage of your code base is portable and reusable for future migrations. It's hard to believe that there are some down at 10% and 90%, but there's probably I consolidated some of this. I think a better way to look at it is to look at there's a fairly even breakdown in the marketplace between beginners who were at 30% of reusable code and under, 35% that are at 40 to 50, and the mature 36% that are at 60, 90 to 90% of their integration code reusable for future migrations. This makes sense. I think it's only in the last few years that vendors in this space have begun to look at the model of separating the code from the actual data and being able to make code extremely reusable. So I would expect to see this to continue to grow in the years to come. So we also wanted to know, based on the State of the Union, what are the challenges of modern data integration? And we looked at this from a few different perspectives. First of all, what are the biggest challenges for your overall data integration program? Skilled resources, number one. I think that there's still this is reflected in the fact that there's a large number of people still using inadequate tools to be able to manage data pipelines and to run modern data integration programs in the digital age. It's not working, and so they don't have the skills to be able to continue hand coding. They don't have skills to be able to use the tool sets that are available. So this tends to be an issue. So all the more important. I mean, this is why EMA has a perspective that the vendors who are using artificial intelligence and machine learning to be able to automate repetitive tasks that used to require skilled resources. These are the companies that are going to surge ahead of the others, and companies who start investing in this technology will be able to increase the number of decisions they're making, the speed at which they can make decisions. Too many changes in the data. Again, if changes in data and the number 3, break and fix, if all of this has to be repaired manually, it's a huge drain on the program. Our encouragement: look for vendors that are beginning to automate this stuff. The challenges are the number of data pipelines will only make these issues even more complex. We also wanted to know what are the challenges of moving towards real-time integration. Right up at the top is the analysis of data is too slow or difficult. The streaming data vendors have done a great job of speeding up this concept. In fact, our research showed that about 50%, that in streaming platforms, about 50% of the work that is being done is transformation of data and cleansing of data, and about 50% of the work being done in streaming platforms is analytics. And so integration doesn't exist by itself anymore. Real-time integration requires not only the transformation and cleansing of the data, but the running of analytics on that data and the need to be able to return those results in real time. It's also difficult to validate data, prepare data in real time. And again, by looking at this research, one of the things that you can begin to do is put together your checklist as you're looking at modern data integration and modernizing your data integration program and looking at some different vendors to modernize with. This gives you a checklist of the kinds of things you can be looking for, because all of these things and capabilities are being built into modern data integration platforms. We also looked at what are the biggest challenges you're facing with cloud-based data integration platforms. Number one, network cost. The cloud is not free, and not all cloud implementations are less expensive. You can see the number 3 answer is unexpected cost. We moved more data in the cloud. Number 4, getting data out of the cloud. The difficulty of once it gets in the cloud, how do I get it out for my use on premise? So the EMA perspective is not that the cloud is bad, but every use case is different. And it is important to look at the cost of moving data to the cloud, moving it around in the cloud, and especially in terms of some of the unexpected cost. And so we're actually seeing some companies that are moving their data back out of the cloud now and back to on-premises with new technology that's available on-premises and managing it themselves. It's interestingly enough, much of the technology that cloud vendors are using to deploy cloud is now available in a much easier to use fashion for use on premises, for private cloud capabilities and things of that nature. So again, cost is a warning in terms of moving to cloud integration. We also wanted to look at what are the biggest challenges you face with integrating the data that sits in the cloud. Number one, the cost of compute resources for integration. And the cost of storing data, network cost, unexpected cost, and cost, right up at the top. It's not that you shouldn't move your data to the cloud and do your integration in the cloud. It definitely makes sense to have data in the cloud when your applications are in the cloud, when your devices are in the cloud, when you're running SaaS programs. Yes, yes, and yes, but it is important to look at what, for each use case, what is it going to cost me to be able to integrate that data that sits in the cloud. We also wanted to know what are the biggest challenges you face in building and deploying data pipelines. And the biggest is deploying something that is error-free, something that is not going to break. And to be able to do it without manual coding. Again, you can see the result of this integration is that anybody that works in the integration space is looking for this next wave that automates things that are being done manually, and especially automates break and fix. So we also looked at want to look at modernization best practices, And there's two areas, automation and especially the automation of pipeline management, that are key to any data integration modernization program. And so you can see here we wanted to know what modern capabilities are most important for your data integration program. So as companies are modernizing, number one, twice than anything else is cloud, some kind of cloud data management. The ability to do integration in the cloud for my data that sits up there, because actually, as we've seen in this research, more data sits in the cloud than sits on premises now for the average end user that completed this research. Scalability on all dimensions. Automation is the point that I wanted to look at here, the number 3, because that also comes out in the next question. We looked at it from the data ops perspective. Quality control is the number 1 most important part of data ops, and quality control has to being able to build good data pipelines that work, that don't break. And automation right there at number 2. We also wanted to know what data-related automations are most important to your organization, and this is just looking at the different activities that you do in data preparation and integration. And the top 2 are interesting, structuring and transformation, because they have to do with data ingestion. It's what needs to be done to data as it is being ingested into a data platform of some kind. Right up there at the top 2 is the enforcement of governance, not just the detection of governance issue, but the enforcement of it, and then profiling is number 3. So again, the automation is key to the modernization of your program, and these are the kinds of things. There's technology available to automate all of these different kinds of activities: the profiling of data, pipeline repairing, parsing of data, cleansing, data lineage, tagging of data in many different ways. And so one of the key areas of modernization is looking at how am I going to automate the difficult tasks that I have done manually over the last several years. And so I also wanted to dig into data pipeline automation, because this is again, while much of the last 20 years data integration technology has been focused on the integration and the cleansing and the preparation of data, what we're seeing now in this move towards data pipeline management and automation is a move towards the orchestration and the operation of many complex data pipelines. And you may have 10 or 20 data pipelines in your company today. You can expect this to multiply over the next 5 years. And so now is the time to begin asking the question, excuse me, what am I going to do when I reach 100 or 200 or 500 data pipelines? I need to figure out how to orchestrate those data pipelines. I need to figure out how to operate them in this complex environment where they're moving in all directions, all different kinds of data interaction, not just with data sources and data targets, but now with applications and machines and IoT. This is an extremely complex environment that we're developing, and it's going to get more complex over the next 10 years. So the most important, merging and synchronization of the many different pipelines, managing pipeline bandwidth and the processing prioritization, and especially number 3, data pipeline notification in repair. The good news is that even if you look at the remainder of this list, these are additional capabilities that are already being automated in new technologies today. Everything from incremental file system updates, which has been difficult for years, pipeline conflict resolution, secondary update pipeline generation. What do you do when you need a brand new pipeline, and if you can automate the generation of that, how much time is that going to save you? And then of course lineage reconciliation. We also wanted to know what is currently in use by those who are using this newer technology. And this actually looks fairly consistent with what was in the previous slide, what is important. But I wanted to pop this up because there are people who are already moving and using this data pipeline automation technology and already beginning to see results from it. And then we also wanted to see what data pipeline management automation do you plan to use in the next 12 months. And I noted here that from what's in current use, the top 3 choices here were number 2, 6, and 4 in the current usage. And so this is actually really telling. A lot of this has to do with managing conflicts. It's kind of if you want to know what is breaking pipelines, it's bandwidth, it's conflicts between the different pipelines and dependencies. And so you can see that people that are using data pipeline automation technology are now catching this vision for being able to lessen the number of break and fix by automating the things that typically break data pipelines, bandwidth, conflicts, and then the incremental file system updates and dependencies that come along with that. We also wanted to look at maturity. Which of the following best describes how you currently automate pipeline development, deployment, and management, operations, orchestration? This was a little bit too detailed. I did summarize the answers that were here so that you can see it. And you basically have 57% of the population that don't currently automate pipeline development and deployment with a unified automation tool. So this is a huge opportunity area. There's a few who automate, 26% are automating most or all of their data pipelines, and 17% only a few. But that's basically almost 80%, 74% of the participants that they're either doing no automation of pipeline development and deployment or very little. So this is a huge opportunity area going forward, and a key component to modernization of data integration. So I want to pause here, and I'll turn it over to you, Raleigh, for the question and answer time.
Great, thank you, John. If you have questions, you can log them now using the Q&A panel. I'm going to go ahead and jump into it. John, the first question is, what exactly is a data pipeline? Can you explain this in more detail?
Yes, a data pipeline is really a term that has been used probably for the last 10 years, and it really consists of any definition and logical definition of what happens to data from the point that it is acquired to the point that it is loaded into or stored in a new form. There are some modern data integration vendors that are using the term very specifically to refer to API integration. There's other modern data integration vendors that are looking really at the orchestration and operation of the data pipeline. In reality, it's any movement of data from one place to another, especially where that data is being changed.
Great, thanks for that insight. The next question is, if I'm going to purchase a pipeline orchestration tool, what should I look for?
Well, that's I think that's the purpose of this particular research. I think that especially some of the data that we showed at the end of the presentation will help you identify priorities for Obviously anything that is going to automate data as it's being ingested into your sources, into your targets, that's a really important component. That's going to be heavy lifting. A lot of that takes manual coding. And then second, it's really important to be specific in asking vendors of modern data integration technology, what are you doing to automate the operation and orchestration of complex data pipelines, because that number is going to grow for you. And so it's really important to begin to look at that from that perspective as well.
Thanks, John. In that vein, we had an attendee who wanted to know, the stats are great, but he wants to know what should we do about it. Now that could probably be an entirely separate webinar, but do you have any high-level insights on that question?
Yeah, I would suggest three things. One, as you're looking to modernize your data integration program, I would look at what is happening in terms of digital transformation in your organization. Specifically, a great starting place is always customer engagement. So as you look at the digital transformation happening in customer engagement, what are the business use cases? What are the kinds of apps that you're using to engage? What are the most important questions being asked by customers that need real-time kinds of responses? And then I would begin looking at number two, what are the data pipelines that would be necessary to be able to enable an improvement in that customer engagement, to be able to give better answers, automated answers, more intelligent answers. And then those two would be an indicator of the third to look at, okay, now what vendors are providing the kind of modern data integration platform that would enable me to drive customer engagement with these particular use cases and deliver these data pipelines in an automated fashion. You may not be able to go backwards to be able to look at your current data integration program, to be able to look at automation there. And so you really want to do it where it's going to have the most impact on your digital transformation projects, and especially around customer engagement.
Thanks, John. You also mentioned vendors. One of the questions is, can you talk at all about who some of the leading technology vendors are in the modern data integration space?
Boy, there's a whole list of them, and I would be happy to, if somebody wants to send me an email, my email is right here. I would be happy to reply in email and give you a list of those vendors and the different parts of the integration program that they address.
Great, thank you. Let's take one final question, and it is, all of our integration is being done with hand coding and older data integration tools. What do you recommend that we do?
Well, I would, again, what we are seeing successful with end users is not necessarily going backwards to try and re-engineer an entire existing data integration or even API integration program with modern data integration tools. What we're seeing most effective is to look for new use cases. And so again, I've said it once, I'm going to say it again, if there's anything you can take away from this webinar, it would be have some conversations with the business about where digital transformation is happening. It may be customer engagement, it may be employee engagement, it could be partner engagement. If you happen to be in the retail space or manufacturing space, a lot of times it's the partner ecosystem where digital transformation is having the greatest impact. And I would look at those emerging use cases as the place to be able to modernize. And any one of those use cases that I just described would be able to justify, I think, the investment in a modern data integration platform.
Great. Thanks for taking all those questions, John. And I wanted to thank our audience for taking time out of their schedules to join us today. I hope that you'll check out the additional resources that will be provided in the follow-up email. And I hope that we'll see you at a future EMA webinar. Thanks again for joining us, and enjoy the rest of your day.